You believe most movies can come down to 3 words? Who wants what?
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the basic nut of any movie, right? Is you have a main character who is trying to achieve something. Because if you don't have those basic elements, and that's not the whole story, obviously, but if you don't have those basic elements, then really what is the story? You don't have a character to sort of be our vehicle through a series of events, and you don't have anything propelling them forward or driving them forward if they're not trying to achieve something, you know?
So if we just think we have this interesting character and all these different things happen to them and these cool like conflict situations, but we don't actually know, what does this character want? Is that something that we really have to do a lot of soul searching? Are we that character? Do we have to see, is this us?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that characters should always be sort of like our mirror or our vehicle through the story. But when I say who wants what, I'm actually talking about more sort of external plot stuff, because that's what's going to give you that plot framework to tell your story, right? So really, the who wants what is figuring out kind of what external plot thing or what destination is your protagonist aiming toward through this story. Knowing that helps you plan the story and write it, but it also indicating that to the audience is really helpful, because that's how we sort of track where we are in the story. If we know what that character is trying to achieve, that gives us like a yardstick to measure, is he succeeding or is he failing? Is he making progress or is he having setbacks, right? And that's that like push-pull of like hope and fear that we have when we're watching the movie, is we're hoping that he makes progress and gets to his destination, but we're fearing the worst. We're fearing all these obstacles are going to derail him or, end up, damaging him in some way, right? So that's what I really mean when I say who wants what. We kind of need to know, who are we watching in this story? Whose story is it? And what are they trying to achieve from sort of an external plot point of view? Because that gives us that spine of the story, or that through line that we're tracking over the course of the movie.
What distinguishes the main character from all other characters in a film?
Well, the writer has decided that that's the main character. No, I think that to some degree that is sort of true. You decide whose story you're telling, right? And then what separates that character sort of in the screenplay or for the audience is the focus that you place on that character. You want to tell the story from that character's perspective or from their point of view, so that we know who we're watching go through this set of experiences, right? So what separates the protagonist from the other characters is really the focus that you place on them and how you tell the story sort of through the lens of their experience. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I just saw Crazy Stupid Love.
Oh, yeah.
For the first time. I know it came
yeah.
out like 2011 or whatever.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. I love it. And again, it was not one that I would normally think I would love, but Steve Carell, he's a good guy, you want to root for him, and then he kind of meets, the dark horse, who then you find out is really not that dark once you get to know him, but it takes you on this journey. But a lot of the side characters are also very complicated and complex.
Yeah, that's a great example. I just rewatched it and I had a new appreciation for it watching it again. I remembered really liking it and finding it funny, but watching it over again, already knowing where the story was going, I could sort of pay a little bit more attention to how it was put together. And you're right, like it's pretty much a true like ensemble, right? Because so many side characters get their own storylines, and it has these intersecting storylines. But I do think Steve Carell is the protagonist in that story. Even though he, like in Act 2, we spend a lot of time, we go away from him and kind of shift focus to the Ryan Gosling character, right? So just page count wise, you might not be able to decide like who is the main character. They both get their screen time, but I think what makes Steve Carell the character or the protagonist there is that first of all, the way the story starts, right? We kind of get into it through him, wanting to know kind of what his story is and getting on board with his experience through the story. And then he also wraps it up in the end. He's the one who learns the lesson and sort of brings that lesson to the group and has his transformational experience, and we're rooting for him, I think, the whole time. So
Sure, sure. But you're right. There are so many, because it's not just Ryan Gosling, it's the Emma Stone character, it's the babysitter, it's all these different ones. And they all have these interesting plights that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
That the Kevin Bacon character, and you kind of see all of their why they did what they did from these different things. But you still, in the end, you root for the Steve Carell, or at least most viewers would. Yeah.
And it's so it does such a good job of like not making anyone the villain as well, which I thought was really fun. And you're right. You're right. It's a great one.
Yeah, it is. It's one that simple concept, but then when you take all the relationship dynamics and all the little nuances and stuff, it's quite. That one's, again, not probably an easy one to write.
Yeah. Were you surprised by the way it all comes together?
I was.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I definitely was.
I was too, and I thought that they did such a good job of making that feel believable, but also it's big, it's over the top, and you're sort of like, oh, it's for humor's sake the way things come together. I don't want to spoil it for anyone,
sure, yeah.
even though it's over a decade old, but
we'll keep 30 years for spoilers.
yeah. But it's so entertaining the way all the storylines intersect, and you sort of don't see it coming, but then it all makes perfect sense the way it unfolds like that. So yeah.
What makes an effective protagonist?
A few different things. I think that primarily they have to be able to drive the action of the plot, right? Like you need a protagonist who can take action, who's willing to take action, or at least can be convinced to take action. Otherwise, your plot won't advance if he or she isn't doing something to pursue their goal. And then I also think that they're sort of on the character side of things. There's certain things that we look for in a protagonist to help us get on board with them, right? To kind of help us align with them and be willing to go through the story with them. So there's, the cliche thing, and the thing that writers hate to hear is that making your protagonist likable, right? But, there's some truth to that. Even if your character isn't likable, I think they do need to be someone that we're willing to go along on this journey with, right? So they have to be at least engaging and entertaining enough for us to, like to dislike them, right?
Sure.
So I think those two, they're kind of two prongs of that question, which is like what makes an effective protagonist plot-wise. In the story, it has to be someone who can take action and who can do things that move the plot forward. And then on the character development side of things, it's someone that we're willing to go along with as they go through this story.
Yeah, I think even Stephen King said in On Writing that he didn't really like the character of Carrie, which I actually like her, but I think that he felt that she was compelling enough and real enough, and he saw some similarities in his town.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to invest that much time in a character that you don't think is actually that likable, but other people saw there's something here.
Yeah, and I think there's, even if you don't, it's been a while since I read Carrie, but I think even if you don't like that character, even if it's not someone that you would hang out with, he does a really good job of creating empathy for that character, right? It's like she's in a terrible situation. She's being bullied at home and at school, and she's awkward and doesn't fit in. And that, of course, is going to, even if we don't like her in a traditional sense, I think we feel for her, right? And that's enough to get us on board and to want to know what she's going to do next,
Right, because that's an interesting theory of wanting to spend time with a character that we maybe if we met them in real life, we wouldn't actually want to sit next to them at the school lunch table.
Right.
I mean, that's,
that's
and
true.
I can think of plenty of people that I wouldn't want to, but would I want to invest time in a story from that character's point of view? I guess, because if we could try to find something that we could somehow connect with.
Yeah, and that's that whole, if you walk a mile in a man's shoes, right? You'll kind of understand what they're going through, and even if you don't agree with them, you can empathize, you can understand. Actually, to bring it back to Crazy Stupid Love, I feel like that was another thing that movie did really well. So none of those characters are unlikable, right? But they did such a good job of making us sort of care about and empathize with Steve Carell in the beginning so that he could then go on and become this kind of cad-like divorced guy, right? So he's, he becomes a womanizer for a short time in the film, and I think that could turn a lot of people off. But because they spent time in the beginning making us care about him and feel bad for him because his wife asks for a divorce in a crowded restaurant out of the blue, that gets us, that sort of earns enough of our like love for him that we know why he's doing what he's doing, and we can watch him kind of do some not great stuff for a little while before, he brings it back around and kind of redeems himself.
And we see a lot of what he's kind of being groomed by this other guy.
Yeah.
Who, he doesn't get it, even from the jeans and the he's like, turn around, you have a mom butt. Like, those are not the right jeans for you.
Yes, yeah.
And so,
he sort of reluctantly goes into that womanizer phase.
Right. He thinks wearing these tennis shoes and these like dad jeans are okay, but because, that's not, he wasn't really setting out to be that person.
Right.
So I think you see that he's actually a good guy.
Yeah.
And he's doing it out of, and then when you see the other, and I hope I'm not giving a spoiler away, but the other kind of divorced dad in the bar sipping on the drink, and he doesn't really have much of a role, but you're like, oh, that's kind of the next incarnation of him. Like,
that's, you want Steve Carell to avoid becoming that guy. Like, no matter if you don't agree with what he's doing now, you sort of know why he's doing it.
Sure.
You feel for him. You want him to not be lonely and sad. So you're kind of willing for him to, be, like you said, be groomed in that direction, even if it's maybe not the greatest direction.